sound. And when I fall, you've tied a rope to me. You're blessing me every day. I was down with an illusion, like a sparrow with broken wings. But now I shine with your reflection on me. I'm getting back up on my feet. That you showed up was written in my palm. You are a statement, explode like a bomb. I get to push myself to victory. You make me winner. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. You cut me loose and set me free. You make me win in every way. You showed me how to spread my wings. Yes, I'm the winner of the day. Yes, I'm the winner, yeah. 'Cause I'm the winner, yeah.
Okay, hold on a second. I need to like keep that music going just a little bit longer. I always feel that it ends prematurely. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I know, I just kind of want to have a dance party, don't you? I'm going to bring in my guests because then I won't be the only one who's jamming here. Isn't this a great song?
It's really good. It's good. I've never heard it.
So I want everybody to know, welcome to Time for Coffee TV. Yes! And this is actually only the second time I have done this, Theresa. My guest is Theresa VanderMeer.
Your second guinea pig.
You are my second guinea pig. And I did it last week. It was so much fun. I decided let's keep doing it as long as I can keep finding guests who are excited about live streaming. So, yeah, let me tell you what we're going to be doing here, Theresa.
Great.
Also, for any of our viewers, Theresa VanderMeer is joining us today from Costa Rica. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct.
Amazing. Okay. Well, I did not realize this when we had booked our interview. You probably didn't realize it either.
I wasn't in Costa Rica when we booked our time. So, never know. It's like a little, where's Waldo over here?
Exactly. So what we're going to do, Theresa, is I'm going to read an introduction to you. And then we're going to go into those 10 questions, the espresso shots. And these questions are to help our young viewers, our young listeners who are interested in breaking into your industry, which is social entrepreneurship, how to do that.
Yep.
So we will just go right into those questions and we'll zip through those. It's usually like a minute and a half answer to each one.
Okay.
And then we are going to, I'll say goodbye to you. And then I'm going to introduce you again. It'll sound remarkably similar to the introduction I had just done with a few tweaks. And then I'll say goodbye to you and we'll be done. And in the main Time for Coffee interview, that's when we are going to get into Work Shelter, what you do there, and how you built your career, how you got into social entrepreneurship from the advertising world, advertising and sales.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Do you have any questions for me?
No, I'm good to go. Yeah.
Okay. I want to let our viewers know, please, put in the chat where you're tuning in from today. And obviously we're going to open up for questions. We can throw maybe in between each taping, we can do some questions as they come up. Again, Theresa is the expert here on social entrepreneurship. It's amazing. I'm going to tell you in a second what her company does, the factory that she has created, and we'll go from there. So again, put in the chat where you're from. Yeah. And let us have some fun. Hold on one second. I just have to move things over so I can see my introduction. All right. Here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Hey there, Java junkies. Welcome back to another Espresso Shots episode of T4C. If you're interested in breaking into social entrepreneurship, which is basically a business that's driven to have a social impact in its work, then this is the episode for you. Because my next guest founded her social enterprise when she was only 24 years old and a few years out of college. And almost a decade later, it is bigger and better than ever before.
Sure.
But before... Oh, did I make a mistake?
We're good.
Oh, okay. You were just clearing your throat.
Yep.
But before I introduce you to Theresa VanderMeer, I want to make sure you've signed up for the Java Junkies Journal. That's Time4Coffee's newsletter that features career advice, insights, and inspiration that you won't find anywhere else. Just head over to the Time4Coffee website at time4coffee.org, and the sign up box is right there. Now my chai loving aspiring social entrepreneurs, please grab your mug or your glass and take a chug of your favorite caffeinated brew, because it's time for another caffeinated career conversation. And my guest is Theresa VanderMeer, a social entrepreneur who believes that business can be a vehicle for positive social and environmental change. Merging her corporate experience at ad giants like Google and Publicis and her research on female economic empowerment, Theresa founded Work Shelter in 2011. She is also a passionate advocate for female empowerment and access to education, as well as environmental justice. Theresa splits her time between Chicago and New Delhi. She loves poetry and cuddling her cat Tuna, who I guess is not with her right now in Costa Rica. Theresa, welcome to Time4Coffee.
Thank you.
Are you
happy to be here?
caffeine ready to go?
Absolutely. Never been readier than this moment.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to let our podcast listeners know that we are live streaming this Espresso Shots interview with Theresa, and I want to welcome, is it Vabev? Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Anyway, so excited that Vabev is joining us from India. Put it in the chat where you are joining us from, and we'll make sure to take your questions in between each episode. So again, we're getting into social entrepreneurship. Theresa, the first espresso shot is, what entry-level jobs are available to young people who want to break into social entrepreneurship?
I'm having this feeling that I'm like prepared for a quiz, and it's like, which question are you going to get? So, I want to talk about one of my young employees and how she entered our company. So she actually reached out to me for an informational interview. She was working in Chicago and had a marketing role, and then that company closed. And so she knew she was interested in ethical fashion, but she didn't know where to begin. And so she was talking to people about this interest, and they connected her to me. And so she came to visit me at the co-working space that I was working at in Chicago. And we just did an hour conversation where she had really good questions and she seemed really prepared. And she asked me this question: how can I get into the space? And I said, you know what? Do you just want to work like 5 hours a week part-time for us? I'll just give you a chance to learn a little bit more about it. And she was like, yeah, definitely. So we started off with 5 hours, we bumped it up to 20, and now she is a full-time part of our team, having calls with the India team every single day. So, to me, it was just her showing that initiative, showing that interest, and making the ask. And especially folks in the social entrepreneurship, like ethical business, B Corp space. Um, Individuals who tend to be in this space tend to have an interest in making the world a better place. And part of, and so for me, if I could give her that opportunity, I was achieving, what my life's mission, which is really to help as many people as I can. So shout out to Abby, who's a key member of our team today.
Awesome. I mean, that's a great example of initiative. And she was in the Chicago area. Is that right?
Yep.
How can our young viewers and our young listeners find social entrepreneurial ventures that are out there so
Sure.
that they might be able to offer their services either part-time or even full-time, depending upon their availability?
Absolutely. A great place for that are directories. So for example, B Corp, and for those of you who are not familiar with that term, it stands for a benefit corporation. So these are companies that have gone through a process of being tested to ensure that they're achieving higher labor, environmental, ethical standards than other companies. And so they've got a directory. You can just go to their site and see companies that are registered that way. The same for the fair trade world. And so, these days, SEO, Google is our best friend when we want to discover new companies. But, we're very lucky to be able to sometimes be just a click away from finding those companies and sending an inquiry.
Now, we're going to be getting into your career trajectory in our main Time for Coffee interview. And for our podcast listeners, check out show notes to see if Theresa's main Time for Coffee interview has already dropped. But just one bit here that I think is super relevant is while you were still in college at the University of Michigan, you ended up going to India.
Yeah.
And volunteering. I guess you had some kind of an internship. How did you find that opportunity, and what was it, Theresa?
Sure. So I put out the word in Michigan that I wanted to go to India. And I, through a personal connection, met this woman who had started the first Indian restaurant in all of Michigan. And she was really excited to see my excitement. And she facilitated that first trip that I actually took to Delhi. And at that time, she introduced me to different tailoring and embroidery centers and traveled with me. And then that same trip, I learned about a nonprofit that works with artisan groups all over India. And I reached out to them to see if I could get an internship. And, it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't glamorous. I think I was cleaning out files, but I got exposure to the work that they were doing. And I did go to visit the artisan groups that were actually in these different villages across India. And so that's really how it got started for me.
I think it's so important that you mentioned the non-glamorous part because even if you're in a foreign country and it's amazing and you feel inspired, you feel just like this is where you need to be, you may be doing something like responding to emails. You may be stuck in an office.
Sure.
You may be doing administrative work, but this is also part of the job. That's part of what these companies have to do. They have administrative tasks that need to get done.
Hey, I just want to say that my job's not glamorous. I'm still doing those administrative tasks over a decade later. So, that's part of the game sometimes.
There you go. So, Theresa, what is a useful hard and soft skill that you look for in the young people that you hire at Work Shelter?
What's nice is when there's layered hard skills. So it's like someone might know graphic design, but they're also, comfortable with like website stuff, just sort of like simple things where if we need something done, we don't have to go, get a contractor, get a freelancer. These like little skills, like being able to update an Excel sheet or to be like a good writer. These are skills that you can definitely acquire, with just maybe even like a weekend of taking tutorials, but they really add value because when we're in the work week and we're super busy and we just need this one little thing done, Oh, we noticed there's this spelling issue, or, oh, we just need a little flyer for this. It helps move things quickly. In addition to that, so the question was the hard skills and soft skills. The soft skills are particularly important to us because we work in India, and that communication piece, you often hear communication as a soft skill. But for us, it goes a little bit deeper, because even though you might have two individuals who are speaking English, that cultural understanding, that is super critical to understand. So for example, if we ask a question to our team in India and say, hey, can you do this by Monday? And they say, maybe, or we'll try. That means there's a 0% chance this is happening. We would be very lucky for this to happen. So to me, I really value someone who like maybe doesn't get it the first time, but they see, okay, there's like a deeper level of communication that's happening here, and I need to pay attention to that.
I love that point. And in fact, because my background is Asia, a different part of
Mm-hmm.
Asia,
Sure.
the more of the Chinese language side.
Sure.
And and I will also say in some Asian countries and cultures, they don't want to tell you no.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you're kind of reading between the lines
Sure.
there, and it's knowing how to tease out if somebody is open to an idea or if they're politely trying to tell you, nah, not going to happen.
Exactly. And oftentimes they want to help, right? So if you can ask those questions that are like, what do you mean by this? Or what would you recommend? Do you have any ideas? Those open exploratory questions really, really help with that understanding.
Great point. Thank you for adding that. What about someone's major, Theresa? Is it a deciding factor for them to get into social entrepreneurship if they haven't studied it, if they haven't studied business, if they haven't studied fill in the blank major?
Yeah. Yeah. I believe that there are so many paths to being an entrepreneur. And so to be a social entrepreneur, you're mission driven, but you're using the structure of business to achieve your mission goals. And so, for me, my undergraduate degree does really map onto what I'm doing in terms of like interest. So I studied economics, Asia, and gender. It's like all of that comes together. It's like weird. I think I'm the only, like, one of the few people I know. Like, I've got a friend who's a doctor, she studied medicine. But sort of like beyond that, I'm one of the few people I know where what I study really does map onto what I do. But I didn't study business at all. And I remember having this feeling when I was in college, and I took a couple economics classes, and those were prerequisites for folks in the business world, or who really did want a business degree. I remember feeling that, like, the folks in this class, their values don't match mine. And so I'm in the wrong place. I should not be in this business. I shouldn't go into the business program because I don't share the values that they have, and I don't care about making money in the same way. I care about achieving these goals of helping these women and doing good in the world. But after I started a business, I realized it would be helpful to know some things about business. So, I just like to sort of bring some like awareness to that of, maybe just to think that, like, don't rule an educational opportunity out because you're sort of assuming you don't want to have that kind of life. It's like I sometimes, I had to learn how to do cash flow on my own and how to set up legal structures and all of these like complexities that really slowed down our progress at Work Shelter and took a lot of years. We're still around, and we're bigger than ever and growing, and that's a beautiful thing. But I know a lot of social entrepreneurs who don't come with that background get bogged down by the overhead really early, and then they end up, closing down, or they don't make it that far. If that makes sense.
So if you could take a class or two, I'm going to be asking you about a grad school in a moment and whether that's important. But if any of our listeners or viewers are in college right now, what classes would you tell them? Definitely take this because it will help you if you become a social entrepreneur.
Yeah. I feel like these sound so lame, but like accounting, legal structure, information about law and legal structures. I mean, I really want to take a class on tax liability. Yeah, back to the, now I'm convincing everybody out of being a social entrepreneur and by not making it sound very, very cool. But these are the things that really, really help you set a solid foundation so you can build your dream on top of it. They need to be done. You can't turn a blind eye. You can't just be like, I don't like math, I don't like law, there's too much legalese. It's like, that's part of really making sure that you have that firm foundation to grow upon.
Definitely. And I'll also add, and I'm guessing you just decided not to go this route, but there are social entrepreneurs, there are other entrepreneurs for that matter, who recognize where their strengths are and they may partner with somebody who has other qualities, other skill sets that they don't have to complement them.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And, and there are folks along the way who have supported me. I have so many mentors that I'm incredibly grateful for. Mentors, friends, community members, it does take a village.
Beautiful. What about a grad school degree, Theresa? Do you think it is necessary to have a grad school degree, less so for somebody who's just starting out, maybe working for another social enterprise? Maybe even if they wanted to start their own social enterprise. You clearly do not have a grad school degree.
Sure.
But if so, what do you think are the most useful ones to get?
Sure. I was at a juncture point where I had gone through the entire process of applying to grad school programs. So I was looking to get my MBA. I was working at the private sector, the corporate world, and I also had already started Work Shelter at that point. But the numbers for Work Shelter didn't make sense. I knew there was going to be no way that I would be able to support myself through working on Work Shelter full time. And so I did see an MBA as a possible bridge to make that jump happen, where I would be able to supercharge what Work Shelter was doing by learning a lot, connecting with people, just getting more of that foundational information about business. And so I got all the way to the point where I was invited to interview at NYU. And that's sort of like the last step. But then I received a job offer that would send me to India for work. And so I ended up going, and this is when I ran an offshore team in a city south of Delhi. So there was an offshore team there that was doing Google Analytics and ad reporting and things like that. And so I had the India experience and I had the ad experience, and I took that position because I needed to be able to support myself. And so I was able to earn a salary and go to India every single quarter, but also work on Work Shelter and spend my nights and weekends at our center at the same time.
Amazing. Amazing. So in fact, you did what one of my guests has called OTJ, which is on the job training. You got your on the job degree.
Exactly. And whenever we make a mistake, I always say, this is the cost of our education.
Great point. Great point. So, Theresa, what kind of life experiences, and by that I mean experiences that we have outside the classroom, maybe doing volunteer work, whether it's overseas or in our own communities, whether it's getting involved in clubs, extracurriculars, being on a sports team, do you think are most useful to have for somebody who wants to become a social entrepreneur?
I think all of the above. I think showing up, helping, volunteering, finding a way to help. I think that when you really get into the doing, and you don't make it too difficult for someone to help and educate you, part of the learning process is, learning happens before you know what to do. Right? That is what learning is. And so I think that any opportunity to learn is wonderful.
Excellent. So, what is the best part of being the founder and CEO of Work Shelter, Theresa?
Sure. The best part for me is working with my team and going to India and actually seeing the change in these women's lives. And so we see women who are struggling with and making difficult decisions on whether to eat a meal or send their daughters to school. And after they start working with us, they gain weight. And so to witness to be part of them, to be loved and supported by them. Sometimes when I'm having a hard day because I'm stressed out about something and I'm at our center in India, the women actually encourage me. So to be in community with them and actually see the impact is at the end of the day what I'm here for.
Love it. Love it. So the flip side, as you mentioned at the beginning of our interview, you're still doing parts of the work that needs to get done at Work Shelter, the parts that suck as the CEO and founder, right? So what is the part of your current job that sucks the most, Theresa?
Sure. So the hardest part is the constraint of resources. So we're mostly bootstrapped, which means that we make a little bit of money. We buy one more sewing machine, we can do a little bit more work. We've been doing that for years. And you can imagine that in a time of a global pandemic, and also in a politically tumultuous time. So for example, we didn't used to have duties on imported products from India. And very quickly, they were rolled out by the Trump administration and they increased our costs on duties between 6 and 17%. And so we tried to pass those on to our clients, and one of our biggest clients didn't want to pay for it. And so they went to try to find a cheaper production center. And so, that's really hard because we rely on income to keep everyone paid, to purchase fabric. So that's the most challenging part. I do not take an income from Work Shelter. That's not sustainable for me for the long term. It's a sacrifice I'm continuing to make in order to put the growth of the organization first. But I think to put it more succinctly, it's like, I think that a lot of folks who come up with ideas, I had the idea for Work Shelter when I was in my early 20s. I had a vision for it to be in countries across the world, and we were going to have a center that did this and a center that did that. And so the gap between the dream, it's like, I'm very proud of what we've done, and it is a real dream come true. This is for sure. But at the same time, I have another vision, which is to have a large center with solar panels and to have a place where the women can stay and additional services. And so, of course, that gap between what is and what could be is what keeps us motivated. But sometimes for me, that can be the hard part, is really the resource crunch that makes the progress slower than I would like.
Absolutely. So how are you able to sustain things when you're not getting paid, when you're not getting a salary?
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I've taken on debt. So I took on a bunch of credit card debt, and that is really how I was able to support myself. Now, in the pandemic, I was able to defer my mortgage. So it's really these like individual sacrifices. I liquidated both of my retirement accounts in order to pay Work Shelter's bills. And it's tough, and I know that it's not for everybody. It's that for me, I'm a risk tolerant person. I believe in my ability at the end of the day. If I need to go get a job to support myself because I haven't been able to make sure Work Shelter fiscally productive, it's sort of like, I know that that's a safety net. And so I've given really everything I could to see this organization come to life. And organizations need resources. It's like, you need to hire people, you need to purchase tables, you need for us, we need machines, right? You need to purchase fire extinguishers, and all of these little things go up into creating, this space where women can go to safely work every day. So yeah, it's part of the game.
I love what you said there, Theresa, about how you are a risk tolerant person, because there are some people who would say, I'm not a risk taker.
Sure.
But I think you're right. It's about, what is your threshold? for risk?
Right.
And what level of passion do you have? Because to do pretty much anything, any career really well, or to excel in your career,
Sure.
you have to have drive. You have to be a self-starter,
Yeah.
but you also have to have grit.
Sure.
And that's having that
So,
high risk threshold
yeah.
takes a lot of grit.
Totally, totally. And it doesn't always feel good. I would consider myself a pretty adventurous person. I learned how to scuba dive when I was 16. I went bungee jumping and skydiving when I was 18. I really I love these things, but those were optional. The risk and the struggles from work shelter, it's like I decided to start an organization. But so many of the issues and the challenges that came up in the next 10 years really came out of nowhere and didn't really feel like a choice. For example, the duties that I talked about the Trump administration imparting. It's like I didn't have any say over that, but all of a sudden I had to deal with it. And I have the choice, right, to keep going on and to find the resources, or to say this is too much. And for me, there's just no end to, or at least, I haven't found the end of continuing to put more into this.
Well, fortunately, we are doing the interview on the eve of the inauguration of a new president. So hopefully those tariffs will get lifted and you'll be
Hopefully.
able to bring back some of those other customers and bring in new customers.
Absolutely.
Three final espresso, Teresa. What is the best career advice you've ever gotten?
Oh my gosh, the best career advice I've ever gotten. What's funny is that I get a lot of career advice that's like, you should just quit your company and do this other thing. But I also get folks who, like, my father started his company in our backyard. So he worked full time, and he started a tool and die shop in the back of our home in rural Michigan. And so what my dad always says to me is, if it was easy, everyone would do it. And so it's accepting from the ground up that this is tough work. And also, for me, I take a little bit of pride in that it is hard, and I'm still here. And, I see that as part of my identity, that ability to push through. But yeah, if it was easy, everybody would do it.
Oh,
So understand that the difficulty is part of it.
that's beautiful. It really is. And it fuels you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's the fun question. What movies, if any, or Netflix, Amazon, Hulu shows, or books, Teresa, do you think accurately depict social entrepreneurship?
Sure. So, I do have a recommendation for my industry specifically. It's called The True Cost of Fashion. And it talks about the challenges that we're facing in the fashion industry, but also the larger manufacturing production issues, and the reality that every product that we purchase or use uses resources, and that has a cost. And so to me, that film really brings together like brings together the challenges. It doesn't give all the answers, and I think that that's the role of the social entrepreneur, is to actually find the solution.
Amazing. Okay, we will put the true cost of fashion, a link to that book in our show notes. Final espresso shot. What would Java junkies or chai drinkers be surprised to learn about your profession, Teresa?
Surprised to know about this profession. Mm, what would they be surprised to know? That it's really not one industry, that it's anything. And it could be any business. It could be construction. It could be chemical usage. It could be hospitals or dermatology. It could be, for me, it's fashion. But really, I would say social entrepreneurship is a lens. And that's the lens that we take to making the world a better place through business. And that means that social entrepreneurship is really accessible to everyone.
Amazing. Amazing. And for the record, Time for Coffee, the little thing I have up here in the above my head, is a social enterprise.
Great. Okay.
So what I started 3 years ago, almost exactly 3 years ago, is about the social good, about helping college students to turn their degrees into careers they love. So I completely agree with you.
Great.
Theresa, I want to thank you so much for making time for coffee today with me and the T4C community all the way from Costa Rica.
Thank you.
I have put up your for those who are listening to this podcast rather than watching it. Tell us where they can find you, where they can learn more about Work Shelter.
Absolutely. Our website is workshelter.co, but you can absolutely find us on Instagram and Facebook with our handle Work Shelter. And I'm also on Instagram as the activist entrepreneur as well, if you'd like to connect there.
Incredible. And you're also taking donations. Workshelter.co is your business, and your nonprofit is workshelter.org. Is that right?
That's correct.
Awesome. Well, Theresa, have a great rest of your trip in Costa Rica. And thank you again for making time for us in the middle of a warehouse.
Absolutely. It was wonderful being here. Wonderful being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank
That
you.
was amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. And I want our viewers to know that if they have questions, please let us know as we shift from the espresso shots to the main Time for Coffee interview. Great. If you have any questions, and if you're just hanging on because you want to hear more from Theresa, then that's what we will do. That's what we will do. So now we're going to be digging into what she does as the CEO and how she went from not knowing anything about social entrepreneurship to having a decade under her belt.
Sure.
Excellent. Okay, here we go. In 3, 2, 1. Hey there, Java junkies. Welcome back to another episode of T4C. If you're interested in learning more about social entrepreneurship, that's a business driven to have a social impact in its work, then this is the episode for you, because my next guest founded her social enterprise when she was in her early 20s, just a few years out of college, and almost a decade later, it is thriving. But before I introduce you to Theresa VanderMeer, I want to make sure you've signed up for the Java Junkies Journal. That's T4C's newsletter that features career advice, insights, and inspiration that you won't find anywhere else. Just head over to the Time4Coffee website at time4coffee.org, and the sign-up box is right there. Now, my Java lovers, please grab your mug and take a chug of your favorite caffeinated brew, because it's time for another caffeinated career conversation. And my guest is Theresa VanderMeer, a social entrepreneur who believes that business can and should be a vehicle for positive social and environmental change. Theresa identifies with the Horace Mann quote, "Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity." And so by merging her corporate experience at ad giants like Google and Publicis and her own research on female economic empowerment, Theresa founded Work Shelter 10 years ago in 2011. She is a passionate advocate for female empowerment and access to education, as well as environmental justice. And she splits her time between Chicago and New Delhi when she isn't in Costa Rica, where she is now. Theresa, welcome to Time for Coffee. Are you caffeinated and ready to go?
Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, have you had your coffee today?
I've had 2 cups of coffee.
You have. Is it delicious Costa Rican coffee?
It's so good. Oh my God. The coffee, the chocolate, it's fabulous here. And now, honestly, sometimes they taste like the same thing. The coffee is so flavorful.
Ooh, amazing. So what are you doing in Costa Rica now?
You know what? in the pandemic, I was working from my 2-bedroom loft apartment in Chicago for, I think, 10 months straight. And for me, like, like you said, I spend usually 6 months out of the year in India, and it was just hard to travel. And so, sorry, I spend 6 months out of the year overseas. A lot of that's in India, but sometimes I stop on the way in the Middle East or on the way home through Bali. I tend to live a life of digital nomad, running my company from both from Chicago, but also from the road. And so I just thought that with Chicago winter approaching, it would be really healthier for me to go work from a place with a warmer climate. So I'm still here. I'm not on vacation, but the view in front of me sometimes makes it feel that even though I'm working, I do feel like I'm on vacation. So
I
yeah.
love that. So it's only been since the pandemic that you decided, hey, I can work from anywhere, so why not go to Costa Rica?
I mean, typically I'm traveling all the time. So I'll be in Chicago for 2 months, and then I leave and I go to India for 8 weeks, and I stop somewhere on the way. I stop on the way home. But this has been the first year. Last year, 2020, was the first year that I was in one place for the full year. And it was just time to get some fresh air. And so I did decide to, basically ride out the pandemic in Central America and in Costa Rica at this moment.
Amazing. So tell us about Work Shelter. And on your website, it's work and the plus sign shelter.
Sure.
Why is it called Work Shelter?
Sure. So Work Shelter really is a place for women to come and work and make a fair wage, but it's also about safety. So many of the women that we work with they are domestically abused, or they are struggling with poverty situations, or they have hard home lives. And so for them, our center is actually a safe space for them. It's a shelter. So they come for the work, but it's really about the community, the safety, the support that they get from being in our safe environment. That's the shelter piece for us.
As I mentioned in the introduction, you envisioned and then launched Work Shelter just a few years out of school.
Sure.
How did you do it?
Sure. Yeah. Sometimes when I look back and I'm like, how did it get this big? Like, wow, this is real. And I kind of just feel like, I know that I showed up for a lot of years, and I put in a lot of time and a lot of energy and a lot of sacrifice to make it happen. But when I go back to those first years before I even started Work Shelter, there's a very clear trail from going to India to do research. So I went to do research on behalf of the University of Michigan, and I just met women and spoke with them and heard about their lives. And they also told me the challenges and what could help them. And so many of these women I'd met who'd been widowed or divorced and were just struggling to support themselves and their children, they said that a consistent income would really help. And many of them were working in the informal textile industry. So they would produce something, and then someone would purchase it and resell it. And they felt like they weren't getting their fair cut of that. And so I first started sourcing products from different individual women or from artisans in India. So from this nonprofit that does silk weaving, or this women weavers cooperative in the Himalayas that knit scarves, like I would purchase those items and then sell them on my college campus. So really I was 21 years old purchasing these scarves and selling them. And then I would just buy more. The money went just directly back to buy more and sell more. I started getting a little gutsy, and I would go into boutiques, and I always, felt like my heart was beating so fast, but I would ask to talk to the shop owner. Maybe they wanted to buy some of the things that I brought from India. And generally I got a lot of support, from these shop owners who probably were surprised to see this young woman with a suitcase roll up. But
what did you say?
I would just say, my name. I would introduce myself. I'm Theresa. I went to India. I worked with these women. They made these things. Would you like to buy any? And most of the time they would say yes. And so it didn't get that much easier. Still every time I'm asking for a sale, it's like, okay, and trying to really, you're showing what you're doing. And a lot of times when people see that, they really want to support. So it started with that. And then it transitioned into, okay, I'm starting to get some custom orders for these nonprofits or women in India to make these specific products. But I'm facing a lot of issues with the artisan development, where there are some challenges with the designs. And at this time, to call India, most people didn't have phones. If they did, there was a landline. And to call from the US, you had to go to a gas station and purchase a card that had $5 worth of credit to make a phone call overseas. And so it was very challenging to get the quality. But also, I started having challenges with transparency, where some of the nonprofits couldn't really share what the working conditions were like, who the individuals working were. And I just felt like, if I'm really going to know that I'm making an impact, but also be able to effectively oversee production, it makes sense to start my own space. And that's Work Shelter.
Incredible. And what was it about India? Why did you want to research women empowerment in India? There are plenty of countries around the world where
Sure.
women are not empowered.
Sure. I have to give the credit to an anonymous donor or an anonymous donor couple that specifically gave funding to the University of Michigan to send students who didn't have any familiarity with India in order to build connections. So I received a very small grant. It was $3,000. And my plane ticket was $1,500. And so I received a small amount of money to actually go to India and do this initial work. And that was just the spark. I made connections, I learned what was going on, and really everything built on top of that first trip.
So, how many women are working right now at Work Shelter? And I know you also have some men who are working there. And what is it that you're doing that really sets you apart from other organizations, or just makes you more of a best in class social enterprise?
Sure. So we have over 40 individuals, 80% of them are women. And it's amazing. We have a training program where we're bringing on new women all the time. So that pace of growth is really fast. We doubled our square footage this year. And we doubled our square footage last year during the pandemic to help better with social distance. But now we're looking at outgrowing that space this year. So we're doubling our square footage year over year, which is really crazy. I think what makes Work Shelter special is it really is this effort where the center in India is run by two women I've worked with for 7 years each. So I've got Ritu, Neetu, and they're co-managers. And so we do have an American team, clearly I'm a part of it. But really our work in India is driven by the efforts of women who are from India. And specifically our production manager, she lives in the community, or she lives just a block or two away from our actual production center. So when Ritu started working with us, she didn't speak English and she didn't know how to use the computer. And now she's running our production. So to me, that's really special because, it's this partnership between our American team and really leadership that's homegrown in India itself.
Incredible. And in fact, you had shared, I listened to another podcast interview that you gave, Theresa, in which you shared what the neighborhood is like
Sure.
in New Delhi, where Work Shelter's factory is,
Sure.
and how the reality of the lack of environmental justice in India just hits you every single day when you're there.
Yeah. And every single time I go, I get very sick. So the last time I went, I got worms. I've gotten typhoid. I've got, you just get bronchitis just from breathing. I don't have respiratory issues. I don't have asthma. I don't have anything that would really, prime me to get that sick. Just amoebic dysentery, you really feel what the conditions are when you're there. And it's just, for folks who are not earning very much, even being able to afford clean water is a big barrier. Affording to be able to afford clean water, the water coming out of the tap is not suitable for people to drink. It's not suitable for anyone to drink. And so, the river next to us is basically an open sewage pipe, right? It's you can smell it for miles around. And so that experience of being there, and also witnessing the women's health struggles associated with living in that environment, really has resulted in my passion for the environmental, for the environmental piece, for the supply chain piece, to have grown a lot in recent years. I started off wanting to support these individual women, and it was about the women first. But now I see there's no way to separate the work from the women and the environmental picture.
So I know that the environment, or you have environmental sensitivity in the types of textiles that you're using. Could you talk about what it is the women are producing, what the different textile products are, and who your clients are?
Sure. So we can think about this in two main categories. We do promotional products like tote bags and t-shirts and swag. So we do swag for corporate clients, for small businesses, basically anybody who wants a logo on a promo item. And then on the other side, we do production for individual designers who have their own brand, and they say, okay, I have a creative vision for what I'd like to make, but I want to make sure it's produced with environmentally conscious materials, and I want to make sure that the people making it are being paid fairly and consistently. And so those are really the two categories of individuals we work with. And so almost all of the fabric that we source at Work Shelter has some sort of environmental qualifier. That means it could be organic. That means it could be recycled. It could be upcycled. And so for folks who are not familiar with the difference, upcycled is basically like we have saris that we buy from a secondhand market, and one of our designers has them remade into beautiful robes. Her name is Lily Forbes. You can find her on Instagram. So these beautiful silk robes that are made out of these saris. So that's upcycled, because you're not changing the actual material. You're using it. You're cutting out the parts that don't really make sense and making it into a new product. Now, recycled, we do production with rPET, which is material that's made from recycled bottles. And so now we're talking about an actual product. Sorry, the door is shutting a little bit. Now we're talking about an actual discarded bottle that gets a second life as this fabric. So the bottle is taken, it's chopped up, it's recreated into yarn, and that yarn is dyed and made into a fabric. So it has a whole second life. So that's the difference between recycled and upcycled.
I know I emailed you about this. I'm not sure if you had an opportunity to do it. Do you have any of your products?
I do. Yeah.
So I'll just
show you. Totally. Yeah. So this material you're seeing right here, this is the actual rPET. So you can see that it's a foldable bag, or at least you're about to see that it's a foldable bag.
Oh, I love it.
It folds into this little half moon pouch in the front. The whole bag can actually fold down into this. So the one of the qualities about this recycled polyester material is that it's incredibly strong, but it also folds down really small. So, when you go to a grocery store, you're like, oh my gosh, I always forget my bag. This bag is so small, and you can see I'm like tightening it up really little, and it expands to be really big. So it's good for a grocery store trip. And then we do have one of the bags that we designed for one of our new clients. Their name is Kind Oliver. And so this is a bag that is supposed to last 100 years. It has rivets, amazing pockets. It's going to be made with organic cotton. The leather is from a sustainable source where it's not processed with any bad chemicals, and the workers who are doing the processing have proper protections. So, so yeah, I mean, this bag that I'm holding here has been in development to make it perfect for a year. And I know it seems pretty basic, but if you could see the inside, you'd see there's a lot of like different utility qualities and functions that really make it very special.
I love it. And I love the fact that it will last longer than most of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It'll last 100 years. That is incredible. Do you have any of your t-shirts?
I don't have t-shirts with me because I'm here in Costa Rica, but basically we can do any color under the sun, any logo. We make thousands and thousands of t-shirts every year for nonprofits who are looking for t-shirts for their volunteers or for corporate clients that want to have some sort of giveaway. So that's a really normal part of our production. And what we do is we have very simple products where the women who are just coming in off of the street, basically we teach them to make the tote bags and the simple pouches and the things like that first. So that work really helps us, keep these new individual women coming in. And then as they ramp up over time, they move over to knits, which is the fabric that the t-shirt's made out of. And every time I go to India, I try to make one of the products just to sort of like stay involved with what's going on with the day to day. And I gotta tell you, it's hard to make a t-shirt. It is hard. And so, we're used to being able to go purchase these items at really low rates, at the H&Ms of the world, but even like the Targets. And sometimes when I'm in stores like that, I just don't understand how those rates are possible. I know what level of skill and I know what goes into that supply chain. So, we're really happy to be able to provide a place where these women who don't have these skills can come and they can learn and they can get paid to learn.
And what's also awesome is the number of hours that they're working, right? Can you talk about what their work life is like at Work Shelter?
Sure. So typically in factories in India, people are paid on a project basis. And so a factory may get a large order, and so they let people know there's work. Do you want it? Come in and just complete it as quickly as possible. That's not how we do things at Work Shelter. At Work Shelter, we know having a consistent income is really central for these women to be able to plan their lives and ensure that they're going to have money for their kids' school uniforms, that they're going to be able to maybe even save a little bit. And so for me, I make sure that the women get paid every single month, whether we have work or not, whether their products have sold or not, whether we've been paid whether a client has paid us for their work or not. From my first couple years in India, where I did a lot of this talking to artisans, I really learned that consistency was super important for them.
Incredible. And they only work 8 hours a day, right? So
correct. Yep.
Which
so
is
they
really
come
important.
In, absolutely. And they have tie breaks twice a day, and it's really up to them. We used to give them an hour lunch break and they would work a little bit later, but they said that they don't want to do that. They want to have a quick lunch so that they can get back to their families at the end of the day.
Excellent. I love your own resume's description of what you do as CEO. You write, I built this. There's an exclamation point.
Yeah.
From an idea in my head to a real live breathing machine that employs over 40 women and 4 lucky men in a true social enterprise based in both New Delhi and Chicago. Can you take us into a typical day for you, Theresa? Either a typical day for you working outside of Delhi and then a day when you're there.
Sure. So when I'm outside of Delhi, one of the first things I do is talk to my team. So I'm either talking to my team in the United States. So I've got a production manager, I've got a marketing manager, we've got finance. And then in India, I've got production and then finance and logistics. So typically the first thing I do when I wake up is India's ending their day. So I want to see what's gone on, what's been the progress overnight. Does anyone need anything from me? But while I still work in the business with managing some orders, my main focus is really on making sure my team has what they need. And you asked me what my favorite part of the work is, and I said, really working with the women. But my second favorite part of the work is working with my managers and helping them oversee their teams and become better at what they're doing. So, I adore my team. Like I said, my managers in India, I've worked with them for 7 years each, and I'm really invested in their growth. And I feel like they experience that sense of ownership over, like, okay, they know that their voice matters and that they can influence what happens. So typically I'm talking to them. Then I'm either talking to prospective clients about work we can do for them, or I'm pitching in on some existing orders that maybe we're having some challenges with, or maybe the team needs some extra support on, like, communicating with the client about what's going on. So I'm really there for my team. And then sprinkled in between might be conversations with a prospective investor. That's something that we recently started looking into, or looking into a special, like a project with a consultant on more ethical fibers and deepening the different possibilities available for our fabrics. So it really runs the gamut. And that's part of the fun of it.
Did you ever think that you would become an expert on textiles?
No, no, not at all. Not at all. Because for me, I came from like a macroeconomic, like women, supporting women through getting money in their hands kind of initiative. I like to shop like the rest of them, but maybe not actually. For me, the clothing and what we make is really a means to an end. And it's important because the whole machine has to work. The system of Work Shelter does not work if we don't get orders and if we don't get revenue. There's no way to pay the women if we don't get orders. And so it's an essential part of the work. But for me, my passion is really about the individual stakeholders that we work with.
Absolutely. How has COVID affected your business and bottom line? I listened to another podcast interview you gave, I guess, earlier in 2020, and
Sure.
you said that you had only had to lay off one person, and
Sure.
that was yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is true. I'm really proud to say that we grew during the pandemic. We increased our sales, even though we were we were under lockdown for 2 full months in India. And, as you can imagine, business disappeared. I cannot believe that we grew. But I think it's a testament to how consciousness around ethical production, around conscious consumption, around, engaging more deeply with the material world that we experience every day is really becoming more important for folks. And so, that's part of it. It's also a testament to the work that my team did. So I talked earlier about the promotional product space and the designer space. The promotional product space is largely built on events. And clearly there have not been many in-person events at all. And so I think we saw an 80% decline in that space in revenue, but it was all picked up by the designer business. And so during the early years of Work Shelter, we weren't actually able to make complex sewn items. But every year we just kept pushing and pushing, and we just got a little bit better and a little bit better, and we invested more into training. And so, when the promotional products business disappeared, we actually had all of these skills that we were able to bring into the designer business. So that really helped us get through.
I'm so glad to hear that. And please remind me, because my brother-in-law and my brother-in-law owns the business. Well, I should say he's the CEO. He actually just sold it at the beginning of 2020, but he owns a promotional marketing company, big one. And
Sure.
my sister is a vice president there, so we'll have to get Work Shelter connected.
Love this plan. Very good plan.
So before we talk about what you did prior to going out on your own, Theresa, because there was a lot of zigging and zagging that went on, I thought we could flash back to when you were in college. You went to the University of Michigan and you graduated with a BA in anthropology and international affairs.
Sure.
Did you know what you were going to do with that degree when you graduated?
I didn't think I was going to make it through college, Andrea. I felt like I'm first generation My parents were both blue collar workers. My mother was a welder, Rosie the Riveter. My mother was a welder at a furniture company in Michigan, and my father was in the tool and die trade. So it was a trade, and so I really grew up in an environment where that was sort of the norm, and it was encouraged. And so really, my desire to go to college came from a place of like knowing that the world was bigger. I had this transformative trip to Peru when I was a young teenager. And so I just loved being in school. I loved learning, and I knew the world was a bigger place. And so it was really a very big deal for me to even go to the University of Michigan. So, and everybody I knew who had gone to college, besides my teachers, had dropped out. They talked about how expensive it was, how hard it was to get through. And so I did have support, significant support from my teachers who encouraged me down that road. So by the time I got to the University of Michigan, I really felt like, I had to work through all of college. I remember I was working over 30 hours a week, a part-time job, while having a full course load. And so by the time that I got to the end of my degree, I was just like, couldn't believe I had gotten there. It was a marathon. It was a sprint of trying to support myself, but also get through at the same time. So, there was a number of years afterwards where I felt like, oh my gosh, I should have gone into medicine, because if I had gone into medicine, I would be able to help people in a more direct way, and I would be able to support myself. But really what ended up happening is I had to support myself, and I had a career, I had a degree in anthropology that didn't lend itself specifically to any industry or role. But I had interest in supporting women in need. And I had this experience in India. So really I had these sort of like parallel lives where work shelter was a passion project. And then I graduated during the heart of the recession, and it was just sink or swim. I had to figure out how to support myself. There were no more student loans. The part-time work didn't cut it anymore. I had to get a career. And for me, that started at a temp agency where I was just placed for one day to answer the phones. I did a good job answering the phones. I was like, oh my gosh, here I am. I haven't gone to college, and here I am answering phones. But that's where I started. And they said, you did a good job this one day. Why don't you come back for 2 weeks while our administrative assistant's on leave? So I did that. And during that 2 weeks, I was working with executive leadership at the company. And they said to me, you're really smart. What's your story? What are you doing here? You're late in the office trying to make sure things are done every day. We'd like to know more about you. And that's when I was brought on for a full-time permanent role in client management. And that really kicked off my career.
Incredible. So let's see, I'm just going forward here. Which was that at Fusion? What was that
at
first
Fusion.
job?
Yes,
Fusion
that
Medical
was.
Communications.
Yeah, pharmaceutical marketing agency. Yeah.
Incredible. I love that you did the temp angle. I actually did that as well at
Okay.
one point after graduation. And I was just thinking the other day, I need to be talking about that more on LinkedIn because for whatever reason, I'm not seeing it. There may be people talking about temp organizations, but I actually think that's a great way to get your foot in the door.
Totally. And it's not like they said to me, oh, you're temping for one day. This could turn into something. They never said that. They said, come for one day. Okay, come for 2 weeks. Sometimes they would call me the morning of. I would say yes. I needed the money. I needed the work. And so I would have never known what would come out of that, those first couple experiences temping.
Excellent. Not excellent that you didn't know, but excellent that you did get something out of it.
Absolutely.
You alluded to the fact that you graduated during the last Great Recession. You graduated in May of 2008.
Yeah.
I have to imagine, Theresa, that you feel a tremendous amount of empathy with the class of 2020 and the class of 2021 who'll be graduating this spring. We're doing this interview now in the middle of January of 21.
Absolutely.
What advice do you have for these young students who have either already graduated or about to graduate into a terrible economy with the coronavirus still around?
Sure. I really do have a lot of like empathy and compassion. And I remember being turned down for a retail job after I had graduated and just feeling like, wow, I can't even get a job at a store, yeah, even though I have this 4-year degree. But as I just shared, I needed a different path, and there was a different path. And so what I would say, I know it can be hard to just like wake up every day and say, okay, I'm looking for a solution. I'm looking for a job. I want to work in this space. And to feel that like rejection, or to feel like I don't know how I'm ever going to get to the place where I really want to be. And what I would say to that is like, maybe you can't keep your energy up every single day, but try to look at the context. Things will not be like this forever. They probably won't even be like this for one more year. There is going to be an opportunity for you. And so to keep your eyes and to keep your attention pointed outward, to keep conversations happening, to keep up those efforts, eventually something will work out. And just assume that it's not going to work out right now. Assume that it's going to take 6 months. Give yourself a timeline that's not like, I want to get like this has to be resolved. I have to know what I'm doing in the next month. Sometimes we just can't do that. And I come across that even as an entrepreneur, where I'm like, I really want to know, like, what will my numbers be next month? I don't know what my numbers are going to be next month. I have no idea what's going to happen, right? Like there are all these things that we can't control. So the only thing that we can control is ourselves, and just keeping an outward look and a motivation, knowing that the opportunity will arrive at some point.
100%. I agree. Now, I actually have your resume right here, and I usually mark them up.
Oh my gosh.
It's fun to look at.
Yeah, it's been a while since I looked at mine. I don't need to send it to early. So, yeah.
Well, I see that you got an internship in January of 2009. You graduated in May, and there's like a gap, and that may be the gap when you were working at the temp agency. Mm-hmm. But you worked for 4 months at Amnesty International.
Yeah.
Would you say that was your first professional experience after you graduated, or was there something else?
Yeah, I would say that was it. So after I graduated, I went to India, and I had this whole big scheme. I was going to take a pony caravan with this women weavers cooperative to Tibet and like work and like get footage of them getting this like raw cashmere from these goats that they were herding. I just had this like big scheme. And when I got to India, it fell apart. And so I needed to do something. Amnesty International had an office in Delhi. And so I was able to use my writing skills to edit their magazine. And actually that experience at Amnesty International, I mean, it was like interesting to go to protests and, and like actually like be in the streets protesting for women's rights, and the police would come and all this stuff. Like that was interesting. But from a day-to-day perspective, I just felt like, you know what, I don't really feel, I'm like not excited to go edit this magazine. And so that was a sort of thing in the keep doing your own stuff. You like go and source from these artisans and sell it, and that eventually led to Work Shelter. But yes, that time at Amnesty International was the first like post college opportunity.
Got it. And when you say it was like a ding, was that like your gut that was telling you this is not the right path to keep pursuing in terms of the type of do-gooder work that I want to be doing? I want to get my hands dirty.
Yeah, exactly. I maybe I'm short-sighted, but I didn't believe that I was really making a significant impact with the editing that I was doing. And I'm not saying that work's not important. I believe that it does contribute. But for me, I knew that I wanted to really see with my own eyes. I didn't want to just say like, oh, we're putting this thing out into the world. Hopefully people read it. I really wanted to be more direct. Like, these women need something. I'm going to see if I can get it to them. Okay, we're going to grow that and grow that and grow that.
I love it. And in fact, I just posted this week on LinkedIn about how I think that we find what is the right fit for us in terms of our careers is less of like a chef following a set recipe, and it's more like mad scientist in the laboratory, right? Like throwing in different things, poof, let's see if that works, right? It's like you're working on a formula. I lost your audio. I don't, I'm like seeing lots of,
I'm here. Can you hear
there
me?
you are. There you are. Go ahead.
Okay. I was just gonna. That totally resonates, and you don't know how things are gonna taste always, right? Like, and just to share like a small moment of vulnerability. Some of those early jobs I had, I would wake up and cry every day. I would wake up and cry. I had a hard boss. I didn't want to be working in the pharmaceutical industry. I didn't believe I believe there were ways that I could help people, and I wasn't doing it. And I really felt like a deep moral contradiction. But now, when I think back to all those times, I think about what I took with me. I learned how to follow project management plans. I learned about timelines. I learned actually on somebody else's dime. I had to show up, I had to do the work, but I got paid to do that. And so, work shelter, what I do at work shelter, all these skills, sure, I developed some as I was going along actually building this business, but a lot of them I brought with me from those jobs that I had that, I woke up and cried about because I didn't want to go to in the morning. So,
Oh my gosh.
it's
Thank
okay.
you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm giving you a big virtual hug.
Thank you.
And I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
So, a year after your Amnesty internship ended, and almost 2 years after you graduated, you get a couple of jobs. The first one is at Champion Learning Center, where you were a tutor for underserved students from failing school districts.
Sure.
And you were teaching kids geometry, algebra, and other subjects.
Sure.
And the second job is at Fusion Medical Communications, the one where you got that temp position.
Yeah.
And you were hired then full-time as an associate account executive.
Yeah.
And that's where you supported pharmaceutical marketing efforts by creating slide decks. You created sales agent toolkits and direct mailings, among other things.
Sure.
I get it. Like it was paying the bills, but you were also learning skills. You stayed there for 5 months at Fusion, and from there you moved to translations.com. I'm sharing this, I'm kind of breaking it down for our listeners because I think it's really helpful for them to hear how it isn't always a straight line getting to where you want to go, even though you knew in your mind what you wanted to do. Practically, you had to pay the bills.
Absolutely.
So you were doing what you had to do. And from there, as I said, you went to translations.com. You stayed there for a year. You joined as an account coordinator. You managed almost $2 million. It was a year book of business, 2 million a year book of business, and ranked among the top 3 revenue earners. And your next job was at Google, where you worked as an account manager. And there you also managed almost $2 million, but that was for $2 million a quarter book of business with clients that included Best Buy, Target, and Walgreens. What were you doing in that job at Google? And you stayed there for 7 months and you moved to Mojiva? Is that how you pronounce it?
Mojiva, sure, yeah.
Okay, so what were you actually doing at Google and what skills were you learning there?
Yeah, so what's crazy about my position at Google is I didn't even apply. Okay, this is wild. I had a resume on monster.com. Monster.com. And I don't even know if monster.com is a thing anymore. But
It is.
It is. Okay, gotcha. So people are still using it. Yeah. So someone saw a recruiter saw my resume and gave me a ring and said, I have this position. And I said, great, I'd like to interview for it. And so at Google, I got to tell you why I got hired at Google. I mean, I had some experience so at translations.com, I learned a little bit about technology, but I didn't know anything about ads. And so when I was interviewing at Google, I didn't know that they had actually already decided to hire someone else for the position. And what happened was I had studied, I had like tried to, there was all this terminology like the GDN and this, and I was like, I had gone deep dive for days before my interview into what they actually do. And so when I went into the interview, I was of course prepared, but I found out later that they decided to add headcount. Like they took headcount away from the West Coast office and added it to the New York office, which is where I was living at the time, because of my quote unquote enthusiasm. And so it was 100%, not 100%, but it was like over the top, the soft skills of going in, being energized, being excited to be there, being positive, not knowing anything, but showing that I'd done some homework. They decided to move headcount for me. So that, I mean, and my boss loved that about me. And so when I came on board, she really, she wasn't there from a day-to-day perspective to teach me all of the ins and outs of things. I got some initial training, but I was like a low person on the totem pole with just how did the ad campaign work? How many people clicked on the ads? Put a picture of the ad into a PowerPoint deck, send it to the ad agencies who are Google's clients. They are purchasing advertising content from advertising space from Google. And so, I would, like for Walgreens, they wanted to get people to download their app. And so I was responsible to just see, okay, we have these little ads that come up when you're reading the news on your phone or playing a game on your phone. There's these little ads that come up, and Walgreens would say, their ads would say, click here to download our app. And so my job was just to make sure that the budget was spent properly, that the campaign was as successful as possible, and that the client really felt like their money was well spent. So yeah, that's what I did there.
I love that example, Theresa, because what you said there about how the job was filled by the time you went in for the interview, but your passion and enthusiasm is what sold them on you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'm guessing the fact that you did your homework.
Absolutely.
That is such a big takeaway that I hope our young listeners and viewers bring with them into their future job interviews. By the way, Mohammed, who's been watching this interview, noted that yes, it is still monster.com.
Okay.
They've got a couple of questions that we will get to right at the end. So let's fast forward, because from Mojiva, where you worked as a team lead and account manager, you actually then moved to the job in India. Is that right? The Associate Director of Offshore Operations Strategy at Vivica. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
At Viviki. So Viviki is an agency that's owned by Publicis, and Mojiva actually went out of business. So I had made this jump from Google to Mojiva for a significant raise. And so, that to me was really important at that time. There were a lot of perks of being at Google, but I had student loans to pay. And so I thought that, okay, if I move to this up, I have the opportunity to not just make more money, but also have a little piece of equity. And if Mojiva gets acquired, I could end up making more money. And it's like, if I'm here to pay my bills, that's what I need to be doing. If I'm going to be doing a passion project, it doesn't matter as much. So when Mojiva went under, I had the opportunity. I had a job offer on my way home from leaving Mojiva when we found out that it was going under. And it was at that time where I reconsidered. I could keep going. And in fact, I was going to get yet another raise. I could keep going down this account management, advertising track, but I don't want to. This is not my passion, and this doesn't actually help me achieve my goals to to push my career further into strategy. It's just like, I don't want to just be an ad expert. I actually didn't like working and I didn't care about the ads. I didn't feel like it was making the world a better place. And so it was at that moment that I took a pause. And so I was applying for business schools, but at the same time, I was looking for additional work opportunities. And I ended up being the only person that was interviewed for this offshore director role, because the combination of having spent a bunch of time in India and also been specifically in the nitty gritty of running the ads myself, that was an experience that not a lot of people had. And also the willingness to go to India was a huge contribution to that too, because they needed somebody who was going to go to India and work with the team once a quarter. And a lot of people don't want to go and sort of like disrupt the comfort and normalcy of their lives from a day-to-day perspective. But that's really how that next bridge happened. I took a moment to say, you know what, I have to pause. And it's a luxury I need to take right now, but it's not a luxury, because I know if I keep going down this track, I feel like I'm on like a treadmill of doing work that is not really, it's paying the bills, but it's not furthering my career goals. So in the early days, I just had to pay the bills. And then after that, I needed to start making strategic decisions about how to better achieve my life goals. And that job, as mentioned, became the bridge to running Work Shelter full time.
Love that. In the Espresso Shots interview, and our listeners should check out show notes to see if Theresa's Espresso Shots episode has already dropped. Just check out show notes for this episode to see if it has. She mentioned that she, as she said, was applying to business school, and then the Viveki opportunity came about, and she was like, well, hold on a second. I can go to India, which is really what I want to do, even if it isn't exactly the job function that I want to do. Maybe it'll, and you had already started Work Shelter. So you were like, then on my weekends, I can work on my side hustle.
Exactly. Yeah.
So what did you do at Viveki? What does it mean to be an associate director of offshore operations strategy?
Yeah. So basically, you have these account managers who are running the advertising campaigns in the US. And this is how it was working at the time. So say that example about Walgreens. So Walgreens has these ads. You have the American team that's making sure the ads are placed properly. And at this company, they had, and actually I'd had a little experience with this at Google, where they had an offshore team who could do the reporting for you. So I had sort of like come up with an easier way to engage with offshore at Google. And so the role was really to help facilitate the relationship between these American digital ad managers and the India team who was doing the reporting for them. And, of course, this was a cost savings measure for Viveki. It was also a really important role because Viveki has all of these other ad agencies who were then having their reporting done by the offshore team as well. The offshore team was quite big. So I had over 70 individuals at that time who were just doing these ad campaigns or these reports. So my job was to help encourage the US team to continue to work with the India team, but also sort of smooth things over. But then when I went to India, I'm like, oh my God, all these, and I say because they're their early 20s, by that time I'm in my late 20s, so but like all of these like young individuals working on the offshore team had engineering degrees. They are super smart, and here they are just like doing like really, really menial work. And so I came with this idea where I knew that there was more possible for them. And so I came up with the idea that small campaigns to actually be managed by the India team. And so we launched a pilot project where there were 5 individuals who started doing that. And I'm happy to say that those were some of the first individuals in India doing that kind of work. And one of them ended up going and working at, I think, Accenture, India, and the next one ended up going to William and Mary in the United States. Like all these individuals got awesome opportunities. And one of the amazing things with these was all these individuals were women. And so they happen to be the strongest communicators. And, it wasn't that easy to ensure or to support. So basically what happened at that time was that work, that ad campaign support had to happen at night. And so those individuals, those women working, there's a policy in this town in India where any woman who's working at night gets like a free cab home, like she gets like a free ride home, and then there's an armed guard in the vehicle with her. And I had that experience where I was like, this is actually very, like uncomfortable to have both a driver and a guard. You really feel kind of like intimidated. And so one of the reasons, and because of that, the leadership team in India avoided putting women into positions where they were working at night, but it also meant that they weren't given these work opportunities. And so I found out that women were specifically being excluded from this new opportunity. And I brought the company's discrimination policy and I said, we can't make this decision for these women. It's really up to them. We can't just say that they're not able to get these roles because they're women. So for me, that was this amazing experience where it's like, sure, I definitely have impact at Work Shelter on women, but I also had a significant impact on these specific individuals. And kind of sort of just to wrap that piece up, one of them decided she wanted to leave that industry and she now co-manages Work Shelter. So
incredible.
Yeah, so that's me too. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for sharing that story, Theresa. It's amazing.
Absolutely.
So 2 final Time for Coffee questions. I know we've been going here for a long time. You are such a sport. Okay. These are questions I try to ask all of my guests. If you could share a time in your professional life when you really struggled, and you're probably thinking like, what time was I not struggling?
All of it, 100%.
But in particular, it may have been when you were working at Mojiva and you lost your job because the company went under. It could have been another point. But the most important thing here is how you persevered and if there was a lesson that you learned in the process.
Oh, a lesson in the process. I do think that the hardest part was the beginning. The hardest part was the beginning when I didn't have any infrastructure. I didn't have connections. I didn't have, my parents weren't white collar workers who knew people. Like I had to build that road brick by brick. But I think the lesson from that is that even when things are hard now, or when things were hard when I lost my job at Mojiva, it feels like nothing could be as hard as when I first graduated and I didn't have a single clue in the world about what was going to come next. And it was a recession, and so I think the takeaway is like, once you get started, there's momentum, and it's never easy, but it definitely gets easier.
Well, that goes right to my heart because that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I feel you there. Last question, Theresa. If you could go back to college, back to Michigan, and do it all over again, but based on the wisdom you have now, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh my gosh. I think I would take more business classes. I had fun taking Russian cinematography. I had fun taking Japanese poetry. I had fun, like all these things were interesting. But I do wish that I had more practical, tangible skills that would help me build the foundation for what Work Shelter is today. So, I think, like I said, the accounting class, the legal class, I think these things would have just been worth the effort and worth the time.
Well, I want to thank you so much for your time, Theresa. And before I say goodbye to you, I want to make sure that you are able to let our viewers and our listeners know where they can find you and how they can support Work Shelter.
Sure. I've had such a wonderful time being here. And also, like anybody who's listening to this, I just want you to know that I believe in you, and I'm so excited to see what you bring into the world. So if you'd like to connect, I'm the activist entrepreneur on Instagram. Workshelter.co is our website. We have Workshelter as our Instagram handle. We're also on Facebook. Yeah, so thank you so much for listening.
Oh my gosh, I want to thank you so much for making time for coffee today, for that delicious Costa Rican chocolatey coffee with me and the T4C community. Theresa, huge congratulations on everything that you have achieved. You are such an inspiration to me, and I have no doubt to hundreds, if not thousands of other young people. Actually, I shouldn't put myself in the category as a young person, but as a woman entrepreneur, I'm like, I'm giving you a high five, girl, right across the Wi-Fi signal here. Yep, high five.
Good.
But you are so awesome. Your spirit is beautiful. And the world is a better place because people like you are in it.
I'm so grateful for your time, Andrea. Thank you. And for what you're doing as well. Absolutely.
Before I let you go, just two quick questions
Sure.
that these people have been waiting patiently for from
Sure.
Jason Bellini.
Okay.
He said, okay, I'll put it up on the screen so you can see it, but how inspiring you are and whether you're concerned about robotics displacing jobs in the garment business.
I'm concerned about robotics. Amazing question, Jason. Yes, I am concerned about robotics replacing jobs in every industry. And that's one of the reasons why I personally believe a universal basic income, ensuring people have enough resources to support themselves just with their basic needs, is going to be really important as we reconsider what the economy should look like and grapple with how these efficiencies actually impact. So I'm trying to create jobs for women in need, but I do believe we'll get to the point where production is so efficient that not everyone needs to work. And I'm really worried about how people will support themselves when that time comes. So great question.
Well, it's a great question because he's a great journalist. He's actually a multimedia journalist at the Wall Street Journal.
Great.
And Jason and I used to work together at CNN, and he's just an incredible human being and also a fantastic journalist. Thanks for the terrific question. And then one other, which was more on the fun side from Mohammed.
Did I try to wear a sari? Oh my gosh. Yes. And actually on my Instagram, there's a picture of the women wrapping me with a sari, but it was a particularly cold winter day. And so, when someone has like those ice hands, they were having a lot of fun, like poking me with their freezing cold hands. So, once a month we have cake day where we celebrate everybody's birthdays, and like the women we just have a little party. And so we dress up for that. And so yes, during cake days when I'm in India, I will dress up in the traditional sari.
Yeah, but they need to like warm their hands on some hot chai before they.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, Theresa, this has been really, really incredible. And I just wish you tons of luck. I'll be in touch and I'll let you know when the episodes go live on the podcast. And from here on out, enjoy your time in Costa Rica. And I hope that 2021 is an even more successful year for Work Shelter.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. It's been wonderful connecting with you.
Take care.
Take care. Bye.
And I want to thank all of you who are still with us at the end. I am trying to do the Time4Coffee TV once a week. And next week I may have another incredible guest. So keep watching. If you haven't followed me on LinkedIn, I hope you will. And that way you'll know about these live streams. Take care. Have a great day, everybody.